A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
Imagine you are standing in front of a door that weighs 6 tons. There is no keyhole, no handle, and no keypad. The air is perfectly still, chilled to exactly 68 degrees, and it smells like nothing at all because the filtration system is scrubbing every organic molecule from the room. To get this far, you have already passed through 3 layers of biometric verification, and now the wall itself is waiting for your eyes. This is not a scene from a spy thriller or a high-security government facility. It is where a growing number of people are keeping their most private possessions. You can hear the faint rhythmic hum of the industrial-grade HVAC system, a sound that represents the literal breath of a multi-billion-dollar industry that most people do not even know exists.
It is the ultimate evolution of the basement safe, corn. I am Herman Poppleberry, and I have spent the last few days buried in technical specifications for these new age bunkers. Today's prompt from Daniel is about these high-security private storage facilities and the massive shift we are seeing from traditional bank-based safety deposit boxes to these private, non-bank vaults. Daniel was actually mentioning how expensive it is just to get a basic box for physical media backups over in Jerusalem, which got us thinking about the sheer scale of the high-end boutique industry that is popping up globally. We are talking about a market that, as of early 2026, is estimated to be growing at a compound annual growth rate of 7.2% in the United States alone.
It is a wild world because most people still think of a safety deposit box as that dusty little metal drawer at the local branch where their grandmother kept her pearl necklace and a birth certificate. But that version of the industry is basically on life support. The major retail banks are exiting the business as fast as they can. If you try to open a new box at a big-name bank today, they will likely tell you there is a 10-year waiting list or that they are phasing out the service entirely. JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo have been leading the charge on this, quietly removing boxes from thousands of branches over the last few years.
The banks are realizing that the liability and the regulatory headache just are not worth the small annual fee they collect. When you look at the compliance requirements we talked about back in episode 985 regarding Know Your Customer laws, the physical safe deposit box is a nightmare for a modern bank. They are responsible for the security, but they are not allowed to know what is inside. That creates a massive blind spot for their risk departments. In an era of hyper-surveillance and strict anti-money laundering protocols, banks want everything to be digital and traceable. A physical box is an analog anomaly they can no longer justify. So, while the banks are pulling back, these private, ultra-high-end bunker facilities are rushing in to fill the vacuum.
And they are not just filling a gap. They are completely reinventing what it means to keep something safe. We are talking about facilities that make a standard bank vault look like a garden shed. These are the modern crypts of the 21st century. Herman, you are looking at the construction of some of these new private vaults in places like London, Zurich, and even here in the United States. What are they actually building these things out of?
The engineering is incredible, corn. We are seeing a move toward what they call six-sided protection. In a traditional bank, the vault might be secure, but the floor or the ceiling could be a weak point if someone has enough time and the right tools. These boutique bunkers are often built as a freestanding concrete box inside a larger building, or deep underground in former military sites. They use high-density, fiber-reinforced concrete, often referred to as ultra-high-performance concrete, or UHPC. This stuff is rated to withstand sustained thermal attacks from plasma cutters and high-velocity impacts from industrial drills. But the real magic is in the sensors. They have seismic detectors that can pick up the vibration of a drill 5 floors away, and the entire structure is often wrapped in a copper mesh to create a Faraday cage.
A Faraday cage? So you can't even get a cellular or radio signal inside the vault?
Not a chance. That is a deliberate design choice to prevent any kind of remote-triggered devices or electronic eavesdropping. If you are a high net worth individual and you are storing, say, a hardware wallet with 10,000 Bitcoin on it, you want to know that no one can ping that device from the outside. You also have to consider the biometric stack. We have moved way past simple fingerprints. Fingerprints are actually relatively easy to spoof if you have the right materials. These facilities are using iris scanners and, more importantly, finger vein or palm vein recognition.
I have heard of vein recognition, but how does that actually work in a high security context? It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie.
It uses near-infrared light to map the unique patterns of the veins under your skin. Because it requires blood flow to work, it is nearly impossible to fake with a prosthetic or even a non-living sample. It is a liveness check and an identity check all in one. And the fascinating part is that these private companies are not bound by the same legacy infrastructure as banks. They can update their tech stack every couple of years. If a bank has a vault built in 1970, they are probably still using a dual key system where you have one key and the manager has another. In these private bunkers, the human element is almost entirely removed. You might enter a private viewing room and a robotic system retrieves your specific box and delivers it through a secure slot in the wall. No one else ever sees you or your box. It is a ghost-like experience.
That level of anonymity is really the core product they are selling, isn't it? It is not just about the thickness of the walls, it is about the legal and regulatory black hole these facilities occupy. Because they are not banks, they do not fall under the same federal oversight. Herman, help me understand the legal distinction here. If I put $1 million in gold in a Chase Bank vault versus a private vault in a bunker in Nevada, what changes when the government shows up with a warrant?
This is where it gets very complicated and, frankly, a bit murky. Banks are heavily regulated under the Bank Secrecy Act. They are essentially an arm of the government when it comes to financial surveillance. If a federal agency serves a broad warrant to a bank, the bank is likely to comply quickly because they do not want to risk their charter. Private vaults, however, are essentially just high-end landlords. They are renting you a piece of real estate that happens to be a 6-inch wide metal box.
So they argue that they are just providing a space, like a storage unit, rather than a financial service.
That is exactly the legal strategy. They claim they have no fiduciary relationship with the client. They do not know what is in the box, and they do not want to know. This creates a much higher bar for law enforcement. In a bank, the government can sometimes get a John Doe warrant to look through records. With the private vault, the Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure are often more robustly defended by the facility owners because their entire business model depends on that privacy. If they roll over for every subpoena, their clients will disappear overnight.
We saw this play out with that massive case in Beverly Hills, the one involving United States private vaults. The FBI raided the place in 2021 and tried to seize the contents of every single box, claiming that the business itself was a front for money laundering. They were essentially treating the entire facility as a single criminal enterprise. But the courts eventually pushed back in a big way, didn't they?
They did. That case is now a landmark for the industry. In early 2024, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the FBI had violated the Fourth Amendment. The court said the government could not just use a warrant for a business to conduct a fishing expedition into the private lives of hundreds of innocent customers. They couldn't just assume everyone with a private vault was a criminal. They had to have specific evidence for each individual box. It was a huge win for the right to be left alone, which is a core tenet of the conservative worldview we often discuss. If you are a law-abiding citizen and you want to keep your assets outside of the digital prying eyes of the state, you should have a legal way to do that. By March of 2026, this ruling has become the shield that the entire private vault industry uses to market its services.
It feels like a necessary check on the trend we discussed in episode 9183 about the invisible billions. As the world moves toward a totally transparent digital financial system, people who value privacy are being pushed into these physical spaces. But it is not just about hiding things. There is a practical side to this for high net worth families. If you have a collection of rare watches or historical documents, you cannot just leave those in a home safe. A home safe is just a convenient to-go box for a sophisticated burglar.
and insurance companies know that. If you try to insure a collection of Patek Philippe watches worth $5 million, your carrier is going to insist that they are stored in a facility with 24-hour armed guards and Grade 5 vault certification. These boutique bunkers provide that certification. They also offer white glove services that a bank would never dream of. I read about a facility in Singapore that has a private lounge where you can have a glass of high-end scotch while you examine your art collection in a climate-controlled viewing room. They will even arrange for armored transport to bring your assets directly from the airport to the vault. It is a seamless, high-luxury experience.
It is like a five-star hotel for your stuff. But who is the modern client? Daniel's prompt mentioned the traditional clientele versus the modern demographic. I assume the traditional client was the old money family with the heirloom jewelry. Who is the new guy walking through the iris scanner?
It is a fascinating mix. You still have the old money families, but you are seeing a massive surge in what I call the sovereign individual type. These are tech entrepreneurs, hedge fund managers, and crypto whales who are deeply skeptical of the traditional banking system. They see the way the wind is blowing with things like central bank digital currencies and the potential for government debanking of people with incorrect political views. For them, a private vault is a hedge against systemic risk. It is a way to have exit money that isn't just a number on a screen that can be frozen with a keystroke. We are seeing people store physical bearer bonds, gold bullion, and even hard drives containing encrypted private keys.
That makes total sense, especially when you consider the prepper movement for the ultra-wealthy. We aren't talking about cans of beans and bunkers in the woods, though some have those too. We're talking about financial prepping. Having a physical stash of gold, silver, and perhaps a folder of physical bearer bonds or title deeds in a location that is geographically and legally distinct from where you live. It is about creating layers of separation between yourself and the state.
And let's not forget the hard asset diversification. In an era where inflation is a constant concern and the dollar's status is always being debated, people are moving back into things with intrinsic value. Rare coins, high-end jewelry, and even rare earth metals. These things are heavy, they are fragile, and they are targets. You need a fortress to hold them. What I find wild is how these facilities are being built into residential developments now. There are luxury condo towers in Dubai and Miami where a private biometric vault in the basement is listed as a primary amenity, right alongside the infinity pool and the gym. It is becoming a standard requirement for the global elite.
It is the ultimate status symbol, but one that nobody is supposed to see. It is the quiet luxury of security. But there is a flip side to this. These facilities are incredibly expensive. Herman, did you see any data on the pricing structures for these boutique bunkers?
It is significantly higher than a bank. A small box at a bank might cost you $200 a year. At a top-tier private facility, you are looking at starting prices of $1,000 to $2,000 a year for a tiny box, and it goes up exponentially from there. If you want a walk-in closet inside the vault for your art collection, you could be paying $50,000 a year or more, and that doesn't even include the insurance. You are paying for the engineering, the guards, the technology, and most importantly, the legal shield.
And that is a key point. Most people don't realize that the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC, does not cover the contents of a safe deposit box. Even in a traditional bank, if the building burns down or a meteor hits the vault, the FDIC is only there to protect your cash in your savings account, not your gold bars in the basement. This is a massive misconception that leads people into a false sense of security.
That is a huge point, Corn. People think bank means guaranteed safety, but for physical items, the bank is just a landlord. In a private vault, you are responsible for your own insurance, but the boutique facilities often have a pre-negotiated umbrella policy with a syndicate like Lloyd's of London. They can offer you coverage that is tailored to what you are actually storing. They might have a specialist on staff who can appraise your coin collection or your watches so that the insurance reflects the true replacement value. It is a much more professionalized approach than the good luck attitude you get from a retail bank. They understand that for their clients, these items are often irreplaceable.
So, if I am a high net worth individual looking at this, how do I actually vet one of these places? It seems like if they are off the grid and outside the system, that also means there is less oversight if the owners decide to just disappear with everyone's stuff. That is the ultimate nightmare scenario, right? The vault is secure from the outside, But what about the people who have the keys to the kingdom?
That is the primary risk. You are trading government oversight for private reputation. If you are vetting a facility, the first thing you look at is the insurance audit. You want to see a recent report from an independent security firm and an insurance carrier that confirms the facility meets their standards. You also want to look at the ownership structure. Is it owned by a massive multinational security firm with a 100-year history, or is it a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands? You want skin in the game. You also want to look for facilities that use a zero-knowledge system where the company literally cannot access your box without you being present.
You also have to consider the regulatory creep. Just because they are not regulated like banks today doesn't mean the government isn't eyeing them. We have seen moves in the European Union to create a central register of safe deposit box owners, including those in private facilities. The walls are closing in on total anonymity. The state hates a vacuum, and these private vaults are the ultimate vacuum.
They are, but the high-end industry is always one step ahead. They are already looking at jurisdictional arbitrage. If the European Union gets too restrictive, the capital moves to Singapore. If the United States gets too aggressive with civil asset forfeiture, the capital moves to a private bunker in the Swiss Alps, or even a secure facility in the Middle East. It is a cat and mouse game. What I think is the most interesting development, though, is the rise of digital-physical hybrids.
What do you mean by that? How do you combine a physical bunker with a digital asset?
Facilities that offer cold storage for digital assets where the key is a physical object stored in the vault. So, to move your funds, you have to physically visit the vault, pass the biometric checks, and use a hardware device that never leaves that room. It combines the speed of the digital world with the moat of the physical world. It is the only way to truly protect against a remote hack. Even the most sophisticated state-sponsored hacker cannot bypass a 3-foot thick steel door and an iris scanner in a bunker. It is the ultimate air gap.
It brings us back to that idea of the SCIF, the Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, that we talked about in episode 4066. These private vaults are essentially becoming commercial CIFs for wealth. They are air-gapped, physically hardened, and socially isolated. It is a fascinating response to the everything is connected era. We have spent 20 years making everything more accessible and more digital, and now the pendulum is swinging back. The most valuable things are becoming the least accessible.
It is a logical reaction. When everything is on the network becomes the primary vector for attack. If you want to be truly safe, you have to get off the network, and these boutique facilities are the off-ramps. I was reading about a place called the Safe House that is located in an undisclosed location in the Swiss mountains. They don't even have a website with an address. You have to be referred by an existing client, and you are picked up in an unmarked car for your appointments. That is the level of bunker-like isolation we are talking about. It is not just about security, it is about unfindability.
That sounds like a lot of work just to hold on to some gold coins. But I suppose if you're at that level of wealth, your biggest fear isn't a burglar. It is a change in the political climate or a systemic collapse. It is about survival, not just storage.
And that is where the conservative worldview really hits the road. We believe in the right to private property and the right to protect the fruits of your labor. If the traditional banking system is becoming increasingly politicized, which we have seen with the freezing of accounts for political protesters in various Western countries over the last few years, then these private vaults are not just a luxury. They are a necessary infrastructure for a free society. They are the last resort for financial autonomy. They provide a physical anchor in an increasingly volatile digital world.
It is a powerful argument. But let's look at the practical takeaways for someone who might not be a billionaire, but wants to step up their security game. If you are Daniel or anyone else listening who wants to store physical media, documents, or some precious metals, what should you be looking for in a mid-tier facility?
First, skip the local bank branch if they are not investing in their vault. If you walk in and the security is a guy behind a desk and a door that looks like it's from the 1950s, your stuff isn't actually safe. Look for a dedicated private vault facility that has at least 2 levels of biometric security, not just a PIN code. Second, ask about their independent insurance options. If they don't offer a way for you to insure your specific box through a third party, walk away. Third, check their access protocol. Do they have a private room where you can access your box without being watched by cameras or staff? If not, your privacy is compromised the moment you open the lid.
And don't forget the redundancy factor. If you are storing critical data or documents, don't put them all in one place. The whole point of high security storage is to eliminate single points of failure. Maybe you have one box in a facility near your home for things you might need once a year, and another box in a geographically different region for worst case scenario items. It is about building a resilient system for your own life.
That is the diversified storage strategy. It is also worth noting that as we move toward 2027 and beyond, the technology in these places is only going to get more intense. I am seeing prototypes for vaults that use quantum secure encryption for their internal logs and robotic systems that can detect if a box has been tampered with at the molecular level. It sounds like science fiction, but when you are protecting billions of dollars in assets, overkill is the baseline. We are entering an era where the physical and digital security worlds are merging into these hyper-secure nodes.
It's a wild world, Herman. We've gone from burying gold in the backyard to iris-scanning robots in underground bunkers. But the human desire is the same, to have a piece of the world that is truly ours and truly safe. It is about that fundamental need for a sanctuary.
And as the digital world gets more chaotic, that physical anchor becomes more valuable every day. Whether it is a hard drive with your family photos or a stack of gold bars, there is something deeply satisfying about knowing exactly where your most important things are and knowing that nobody, not a hacker, not a bank manager, and not a government bureaucrat can get to them without your permission. It is the ultimate expression of personal sovereignty.
I think that is a perfect place to wrap this one up. It is a fascinating look at the modern crypts of the ultra-wealthy, but with lessons for all of us about the value of physical security in a digital age. If you want to dive deeper into how the global financial plumbing works, I highly recommend going back to episode 983, The Invisible Billions. It provides a lot of the why behind the how we discussed today.
And if you are interested in the physical engineering side of things, episode 466 on SCIFs is a great companion piece. It is amazing how much overlap there is between top secret government facilities and these private bunkers. The technology that used to be reserved for the Pentagon is now available to anyone with a large enough bank account.
Huge thanks to Daniel for the prompt today. It really sent us down a rabbit hole of high-end engineering and legal maneuvering. And a big thanks to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the show running smoothly behind the scenes.
We also want to thank Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the research and generation of this show. Their serverless platform is a huge part of how we put these episodes together.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps other curious minds find us. You can find our full archive and all the ways to subscribe at myweirdprompts.com.
We will see you in the next one.
Stay safe.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird